Saturday, July the 6th, and this is the third edition of Justicefighter Radio. Boy, we got a lot to talk about, but we have a truly special guest in, and I would not be able to do him justice if I introduced him. So I want him to introduce himself, and then whatever he leaves off, I'm going to add it, because this man has truly been on the front line of reporting for our people, for the culture, telling it like it is, and he is just one of those individuals that I knew I needed to have on Justicefighter Radio. So introduce yourself to the people, and let's get into this conversation.
What's good, everybody? I'm Torraine Walker. I'm a writer and journalist, and I'm now the editor of Context Media.
Well, see, that's why I let him do it briefly. This man has been at every major event in the Southeast that addresses social justice. All you have to do is follow his Twitter and you will see it uncut, unfiltered. I mean, he's talking about everything from what happened in Ferguson to what happens in Atlanta to what is happening with gentrification to what is happening in just conscious black thought. And so that's why I wanted him to introduce himself, but he's so humble that he didn't want to go in depth into what he really is doing. Let's talk a little bit about your latest venture with your own media corporation. Tell us what that's about.
Well, what I'm doing is I'm launching a news and information platform called Context Media. What that's about is trying to give people a little bit more perspective about stories that they see in the news. Like, you get headlines and people run on headlines, but they don't really get into the depth of what a story is. So like, say something happens with police brutality or something happens that catches everybody's attention. They pay attention to that, and they only get like what you get from the mainstream media as far as like, this is the facts, this is what happened, but there's always some context, something that goes on behind that, and I'm just trying to give people perspective on that. So that's what the basis of the platform's about. Okay,
and tell people kind of your background, how you got into media, and what drove you to start your own platform that you give it directly uncut to the people.
Well, I've always been a fan of what the written word can do, the power of the written word, and I've seen the way that the written word combined with video can like shape policy. As far as like, we saw what happened in Ferguson, we saw what happened in Baltimore and Baton Rouge. But what you saw was, a lot of times when you got stories about that, what you got was the official reporting of it. Like, a lot of times mainstream media would just be stenographers for, whatever police reports say. You go to the news, or you go to CNN, or you go to somebody and you get one story. Then you go to the street, you talk to the people who were there, and the story is totally different. People will go to the street to get some noise and get some people yelling and everything, but they don't really talk to those people. I want to talk to those people, so that's why I started it.
Yeah. So what is it like to actually, be on the ground doing grassroots reporting, getting the voice of the people from the people? What is that generally like?
Really, it's refreshing, because a lot of people who are involved in social activism, or people who are just angry, who just want to be out there heard, they just want to be heard because nobody really listens to them. People come out there, they come to get some sensationalism, they come to get a headline, and then they're out. What I found is a lot of times people don't really sit with people and talk to them and find out what their motivations are, or what drove them to do certain things, or how they behave a certain way. And the response I've gotten has been really good. I just try to go to people like I would to anybody's house. I try to be respectful. I try to let people talk and listen to what they have to say and respect their word.
Yeah, and I think that's very important. Being in the social justice, social activism space, you'd be amazed at the level of thoughtfulness and the level of understanding of the people that are on the front lines. And I think mainstream media does a very bad job of articulating what's actually going on. I think Dr. King said it best: riot is the action or the response of the unheard. And so instead of calling it a riot, they should call it protest, unrest, of people who have been disenfranchised and have been marginalized and have not been heard. Has that been your experience in the events you covered?
Yeah, that's exactly what my experience has been. People show up for the riot. They never show up for the preliminaries to something that they see on TV, They don't get into the background of why people are out here, why they're loud, why they're protesting, why they see what they consider destruction in the streets, but they never go and talk to people and find out why they like this. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's definitely.
People want to run on what they fear, and they want to run on what they see because it looks good for the media. But the mainstream media doesn't really talk about that because they don't care.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I think a lot of these issues that are bubbling to the surface have been going on for a long time, whether it's gentrification, whether it's mass incarceration, whether it's police brutality. Communities, particularly communities of color and particularly African American communities, have been experiencing these for at least 150 years. And now with the advent of social media, more and more of the unheard voices are being heard thanks to platforms like yours, of course, thanks to a platform like Hits 92.3, the real definition of internet radio. Well, my thoughts are, where do you see these platforms going? Like, what do you think the end game is for platforms like the one you're creating?
I think the end game, or at least what I would like to see happen, I would like to see people, especially African American communities and marginalized communities, be more aware of their power and more aware of the fact that they have voices. And you don't always have to go to mainstream sources to be begged to be heard. You can create things and hear what you're speaking to each other. That's my thing. I feel like, you know how it is. We sit on the corner, we sit on the steps, and we talk to each other, and we exchange information that way. I just think we need to take that and put that on a broader platform, because people outside of our communities listen to us. I just think we need to take control of our power and realize that our stories are valid, and we can tell our stories without having to go through middlemen to do that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with it. I think that we are in a time where people are recognizing the power of their stories, owning their narrative, and pushing back on mainstream media's attempt to erase certain people's voices, erase people's narratives. And I appreciate the work that you're doing to help with that. I've been following you now, 11 years? No, probably about 9 years on Twitter. And just seeing the growth, and then of course you came out to several of my events and covered them, and then we talked, and now I believe that we are in a space where I think that we're starting to control the narrative even more, and I appreciate what you're doing on social media. I mean, if you want to see real uncut journalism and social thought, you need to go to his Twitter. Give the people your Twitter handle so they can follow you.
It's Torraine Walker, Torraine Walker.
And so, Torraine, there's been a lot going on in the news, both internationally and locally. Have you heard about the case of the young man in Coweta County that was gunned down by Coweta deputies? Did you catch that case?
Yeah, I saw the video of it, and I've heard a bunch of different stories about it, but it looks bad however you look at it. Yeah. Apparently he was, what was it, he was complying?
Well, here's a backstory. So June the 30th, Sunday, June the 30th, around 2:30 in the morning, Nicholas Bolton was in his car. It was parked in a shopping center in Noonan, Georgia. He had been sleeping there for a couple weeks because he lost his job, he lost his home, he's effectively homeless, and he was finding a place to stay in his car. He was approached by deputies from the Coweta County Deputy Sheriff's Department, and they knocked on the window asking for his identification. As you can see in the video, he was kind of startled. He woke up, saw that there was police, got into the front seat of the car, produced his license, at which point the police asked him to step out of the vehicle because they believed that he was loitering. He decided to, instead of getting out of the vehicle, he drove off, we believe because he was in fear, and then he was finally pit maneuvered. The car was spun out, sandwiched between two patrol cars and a third patrol car facing forward. That particular Deputy John Collins, stepped out of the vehicle and fired one shot into his head, effectively subduing him, and we believe that it's an unjustified shooting. I was contacted by the family's attorney, Tanya Miller. We got the video, we produced the video on social media, and now you're seeing what's happening subsequent to that. So that's the backstory that I know. I've spoken with his family. He's in intensive care. He's been in actually special intensive care. He's had multiple surgeries to relieve the swelling and pressure on his brain as he was shot in his face. And that's kind of what we know at this point. We are calling on the Sheriff's Department for a full investigation, the GBI for a full investigation, and we want to have another conversation with the Coweta County District Attorney, because the sheriff's already come out and said it was a justified shoot. You know, in my 14 years of practicing law, when somebody is not faced with the threat of lethal force, there's no justified shoot. They're arguing that he used the car as a deadly weapon. My concern is the car was pent in at the time that he was shot, so there's no way he could be using it as a deadly weapon. So what are your thoughts on the case?
Everything you've told me is not surprising at all. When a police department wants to justify something, they're going to justify it, no matter how unjust it is. If you have a car pinned in and you're startling somebody and they're already asleep, Of course, they're going to be nervous. They're not going to know what's going on. I'm pretty sure, I don't know, but I'm sure they had flashlights and everything shining on them.
Yes, they did.
Anybody who wakes up is not going to respond to that in any kind of way that's going to be considered, normal or whatever. As far as him being shot, and as far as him being, as far as him using the car as a weapon, like if you said, if they had the car blocked in, how is he going to use it as a weapon? There are a lot of things that a police officer can go to before they go to deadly force. They can use their physical strength. They have like tasers. They have spray. They have handcuffs. So what that tells me is that they automatically went to a gun and shot this man in the head. I believe they were in fear, but it wasn't because of any justified reason. They were in fear because they've probably been taught that black men are Superman, and anything you do that doesn't kill them is going to put you in danger. It's classic.
Yeah. And so one of the things that we've definitely been concerned about is the media coverage of this, and that's why we released the body cam footage once we had it, because as you know, and many people are listening to this know that there's a narrative that's going to go out there. Police feared for their safety. He was a fleeing suspect. He was dangerous, and none of that is true in this particular case. What they approached the vehicle for was loitering. And under Georgia law, loitering is being in a place where it's not normal for the law-abiding citizen to be. Now, it's a very vague law. But if you're asleep in your car and you're homeless, that's something a law-abiding citizen would do. It's better than being asleep on the sidewalk. It's better than being asleep, in a public park. And many people, the reports I'm getting from the ground, many people use this shopping area as a makeshift motel in their cars. And so it's not that Mr. Bolton was not unknown to the police. It's this particular deputy, I think, overreacted. If you watch, we have the entire footage, and of course it's 30 minutes long, so we didn't put all of it out there. But if you watch the first approach, once he knocks on the window, Mr. Bolton asks, well, why am I being approached? And they say, well, you're loitering. And he says to them, but I sleep here all the time. And then they say, well, either you're gonna get out the car, we're gonna drag you out the car. And that's what escalated the situation from him moving from the back seat to the front seat, and he produced his license. So, there are a lot of questions about this case that we need answered by law enforcement. And so I think the public needs to know and needs to go to the hashtag Nicholas Bolton to see the entire video, and then to help us put pressure, because I think you are very good at that with using your Twitter to apply pressure. Give people some idea of how you go about what you do.
Well, really what I do as far as social media is, I just look around and hear about stories that are going on, like the one you just told me about. I try to get as much research as I can in. I try to reach out to people who I see talking about stuff, and try to ask them, what's going on, what's the background on it. And once I get some of that, I just say, well, hey, this is going on. Y'all need to check into this story. And I start adding people who might be able to help amplify it, because it's just like anything. If you have like a racist incident, like in a store or in a police department, they will downplay that until the public gets involved. Yeah. So that's just what I do. I just try to put stuff out. And fortunately, I have enough of a following that people kind of check for what I'm doing. So once that starts rolling, then people start paying attention to things. So that's what I do.
Yeah. And there was one case a couple weeks ago, I think that you were one of the first to highlight. You remember that case? I think it went viral. I know your tweet had well over 500 retweets or something like that. You remember the case I'm talking about? I can't remember off the top of my head. It was one of these incidents. Well, I'll come up with it. We're going to take a quick break. We got another guest that's going to be joining us in studio for this great conversation that we're having on social justice. So we're going to check out to the music for a minute. You're listening to Justicefighter Radio on Hits 92.3, the real definition of internet radio.